Ramsuratkumar, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, Jaya Guru Raya. Yogi Ramsuratkumar, Jaya Guru
Life History of Bhagwan Yogi Ramsuratkumar. India is known as Bharata Desam, which means the land that revels in the light of sacred wisdom. The great glory of Mother Bharat is its yielding an endless succession of saints and sages right from ancient times till today. In this Bharat, Tiruvannamalai shines bright as a great spiritual center. This city has been identified as the spiritual heart of the world by Sri Ramana Maharshi. The Arunachala mountain here is considered as Lord Shiva himself. In the beginning, this was a mountain of fire. In the course of time, this has solidified into the stone mountain that we see today, and it has the fame of drawing lakhs of people to its abode, especially saints, sages, and sadhaks. Among them, in recent times, 3 great sages had done their spiritual ministry. Sri Seshadri Swami from Kanchipuram, ever ruled by Goddess Kamakshi. Sri Ramana from Madurai, ruled by Goddess Meenakshi. And Yogi Ramsuratkumar from Varanasi, ruled by Kasi Visalakshi, have added more glory to this temple city. Bhagavan Shri Yogi Ramsuratkumar was born on December 1st in 1918 in a small village by the name Nardara, on the banks of the river Ganga in Balia district in Uttar Pradesh, to a very pious Bhumiha Brahmin couple. Right from childhood, he loved the company of the sadhus gathered on the banks of the Ganges. He even spent nights with them. Sitting in the lap of his father, he would listen to the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata with shining eyes. He could not bear to see the sadhus going hungry. Immediately, he would run home and take all the chapatis done by his mother, forsaking all others in the family, and distribute them to the sadhus. His mother used to call him my Sadhvi child. When this little boy was studying in a school near the village, he would often seek solitude and meditate. At home, he would help his mother in house chores. One evening, when he was 12 years old, he went to draw water from a nearby well and saw a small bird perched on the edge of the well. In playful innocence, he threw the rope on the bird only to shoo the bird away, but the bird was hit and it fell dead. Ramsuratkumar froze in shock and tried his best to revive it, but in vain. Grief-stricken, he cried and cried, not knowing what to do. For the first time, the question of birth and death arose in him. He understood in depth what was suffering and sorrow. This formed the foundation for his future father's work. After this, he began to seek solitude more and more and plunge into meditation. At the age of 16, he ran away from home without telling anyone, reached Kashi, and stood in the shrine of Vishwanathaji when he found the whole place filled with an effulgence and was completely lost in the experience. Afterwards, he went to Sarnath and stood near the monument where Sri Buddha gave his first teachings and had a deep experience. Yet he was able to come back home and complete his schooling. He took BA degree from Allahabad University and PT from Patna University. At this time, he acquired the guidance of Mahatma Kapadia Baba and often spent time in his company and in meditation on the banks. In the meantime, he was married to Sri Ram Ranjani Devi at the age of 21 and was leading the life of a householder. He was also working as a teacher in school. Once, Sri Kapadia Baba held his hand in his own and hailed that one day this hand would have more power than his. Once, when he was returning from Kapadia Baba's ashram, he heard a voice like an oracle which said,
"What you're doing is not your work. This is Vivekananda calling you."
The first time he turned around to see no one was around, and then thought to himself that this was his own imagination. Another day it happened again. He knew it was truly a call from Vivekananda himself. After that, he once again engaged himself in more rigorous sadhana. For 9 years, he stopped eating cooked food and ate only green vegetables, fruits, and milk. Also, every year during the celebrations of the Divine Mother called Navaratri, Bhagavan would observe rigorous regime. He would not take even water sometimes. After 9 days, with a thin body, he would stagger his way to the Ganges with his students helping him. He would drink a little water and conclude his fasting. He said that the reason was to divinize his body. His sadhana tapas, the nearness of Kapadia Baba, and his growing longing for God would not allow him to stay put in the householder's life. The one goal of his life was to become one with God. He read Sri Aurobindo's book, Lights on Yoga. All put together, added oil to the divine fire of his longing for God. Our Swami reached a state of mind when nothing but God became his only goal of life. He decided to take long leave from school and go to Sri Aurobindo's ashram. Amidst the lot of crowd, he managed to board a train and sat. When the TTR came and asked for the ticket, he put his hand into his pocket for the ticket, only to find it empty. Why? There was no pocket at all. Someone had pickpocketed his money, ticket, and everything. Had it happened to an ordinary person like us, we would have taken it as a bad omen and stopped continuing on the pilgrimage. But to a lofty mind like that of our Swami, it seemed like God was teaching him not to depend upon money as a strength. The fellow passengers collected some money and bought a ticket up to some station. After that, he walked a further distance and reached a school where the headmaster and the students saw his condition, collected some money, enough for him to reach Pondicherry. Just when he entered Sri Aurobindo's ashram, he felt a deep peace filling his entire being. He knew instantly that was Sri Aurobindo. He was impressed with the way the ashram functioned under the guidance of the mother of the ashram. About 2,000 devotees were staying and working for the sake of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. After a few months there, he came to Ramana Ashram at Tiruvannamalai and began to sit before Sri Ramana Maharshi. Under the compassionate gaze of Bhagavan Sri Ramana, he had some deep spiritual experiences, but the final fulfillment was still not complete. A fellow visitor told him about the Ananda Ashram of Swami Papa Ramdas in Kerala. Upon hearing this, he felt a prompting to visit the place. Yet, even after 2 visits to Papa, he returned to the Himalayas. In 1950, news of the Mahasamadhi of Sri Ramana and Sri Aurobindo came as a shock. Again, a deep inner urge took him to Ananda Ashram in 1952. This time, Swami Papa Ramdas welcomed this young man of 34 years with great love, as a father would welcome his long-lost son. Furthermore, Papa described the intimate spiritual experiences of Ramsuratkumar, which no one else knew except him. Completely overwhelmed by Sri Papa's love, Sri Ramsuratkumar began to stay there. One day, he saw Papa initiating a lady devotee with Ram mantra. Ramsuratkumar also felt an inner urge to be initiated by Sri Papa. He approached Swami Sachidananda and expressed his wish. Swamiji told him to approach Papa and ask him directly. With a smile, Papa immediately initiated Ramsuratkumar with the mantra Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram.
Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om.
And gave the single instruction to chant this mantra all the 24 hours of the day. This entered like a killer arrow of Sri Rama into his being and triggered him into ceaseless japa. He climbed up into the nearby Manjapati cave and plunged into ceaseless japa of Ram Nam. With no thought for food or sleep, his insistent japa continued for 6 days and 6 nights. On the 7th day, the final enlightenment dawned on him. Referring to it later, he would say,
This beggar passed away in 1952 at the lotus feet of Swami. What an instance! All forgetting God. Everything inside, outside, nothing else. Past, present, future, here, there, anywhere, everywhere. All forgetting God. Nothing.
after which the godchild, in god madness, stood out from the rest of the devotees. Completely lost to the world, he was caught in the grip of spells of ecstasy, singing Ram Nam, dancing, and sometimes rolling on the floor. It was difficult for other people to accept this. Swami Ramdas therefore asked him to leave the ashram, saying, "A domestic tree is generally found weak, but a forest tree grows strong, seasoned by rain and shine." When Papa asked, "Where would you go?" The spontaneous reply of Shri Yogi Ramsuratkumar from within was Tiruvannamalai. But it took 7 years of wandering before he landed there. In those 7 years, he wandered from Kanyakumari to the Himalayas like a mad beggar, completely surrendered to the will of God. He experienced many great difficulties and was kicked out of the train for ticketless traveling in the middle of the nights, and there were days when he had to go on with no food or shelter. Later, he told his devotees, the mothers of Gujarat were especially kind to him. It is the land of Mahatma Gandhi. In Tamil Nadu, in a certain place where this beggar begged, some people set a dog upon him, causing bloody injuries all over him. In some places, they threw old and dry chapatis to him with no softening gravy to eat it with. Later, when he spoke about it, he would say with tears, beggary should not be abolished in India like the Western countries. Right from Vedic period, great masters have come only in the form of beggars. India is the playground of great masters. Endowed with God's power, but roaming like a helpless, dirty, mad beggar. What a wondrous Leela of God. Despite all this, the wandering days helped him to learn about the weaknesses and the strengths of people and their mentality. This formed the foundation for his future father's work.
Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala.
After 7 years of wandering, in 1959, Bhagwan Yogi Ramsuratkumar arrived in Tiruvannamalai. Upon arriving, there was no one to give him food or shelter. In God madness, he was roaming through the streets. Some of his regular haunts were the railway station, a tree near the bus stand, the chariot mandapam, some specific places in Arunachaleshwara temple, and outside some vessel shops. He began to sit under a punai tree near the railway station and do his father's work. Gradually, people began to understand that he was no common beggar. They started to come to him for solutions to their problems. Be it pouring rain or burning sun, the tree became his abode. With dirty and torn clothes hanging here and there, unkempt hair, eyes blazing with divine light, and a countenance of compassion, he was doing his spiritual ministry like an emperor, though always referring to himself as a dirty beggar. People from all walks of life visited him. Not only high-level politicians, doctors, engineers, scientists, musicians and writers, but also the common people, who all called him lovingly Swami, Visiri Swami, which means hand fan Swami in Tamil, since he always had a handheld fan. They all came and sat at his feet. During the day, he stayed under the purnai tree, and he would walk all the way right up to the chariot mandapam in the night, with 4 attendants carrying his gunny bags on their head, and sleep outside the vessel shops. During these days, he was often found singing Shri Rama, Jai Rama, and dancing in the streets ecstatically.
Shri Rama Jaya Rama Jaya Jaya Shri Rama Jaya Rama Jaya Jaya
Sometimes he would walk the streets shouting, Bharata Mata ki jai, Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. Seeing his appearance and behavior, the children of the streets would make fun of him, saying, Madman, madman, and throw stones at him. At that time, the anti-Hindi movement was at its peak in Tamil Nadu. Hence, the workers and mercenaries of the local politicians would chase and beat him. Just because he was a North Indian and a Hindi speaker, they tortured him in different ways. There were many times when those people tried to run a lorry or a car over him with the intention of killing him. But every time, the deity which was activating him from within also protected him. Knowing the paths he walked, the troublemakers would scatter broken little glass pieces on the floor where Swami went. Whenever Sri Yogi Swami moved about, singing and dancing in an ecstatic state, or going towards the town in the night, the soles of his feet would be cut in several places and bleed. In the beginning, Bhagavan used to go to a shop where flat puffed rice and groundnuts were being sold. He talked to the owner in Hindi. Sometimes he would also drink tea there. At that time, the aggressive Hindi agitation was going on in Tamil Nadu. One day, when our unsuspecting Swami entered the shop as usual, 2 or 3 workers, including the shop owner, pounced on Bhagavan and bullied him, forcing him to say, Long live Tamil, which of course he willingly did, but refused when they forced him to say, Hindi down, Hindi down. His own friend turned against him and beat him. The angry group then violently dragged him to a nearby gutter and pushed him into it, threatening him again. Still, Bhagavan refused, saying, You do whatever you like with me, but this beggar will never say that. Then these thugs proceeded to beat him right on the mouth until he fell unconscious. What cruelties man commits on man, especially such cruelties to a great Mahatma. Despite all the divine power that he possessed, without saying or doing anything, he accepted it as Father's grace. If he got some food to eat, it was Father's grace. If he didn't get any food, even for 4 days, it was still Father's grace. He constantly lived in a natural surrender to the will of God, with the knowledge that there is only Father's grace, nothing else. Sometimes, when he was sleeping outside the vessel shop, the local rowdies would come and throw chili powder on his face and run away. Once, when Bhagavan was going towards the peepal tree near the bus stand, 4 rowdies surrounded him all of a sudden. They snatched away his coconut shell, his hand fan, the newspapers, and threw them all around. They would then push him around from one person to another like a ball, beating and kicking him repeatedly. At that time, 20 people were standing and watching it like a show. There were even some familiar faces among them. Yet, out of fear, nobody came forward to rescue him. Years later, when Bhagavan would speak about this, he said to Mathaji, This is the world, Devaki. Do not trust anybody. Though he was injured all over the body, he took it only as a blessing from God. Let them beat. They have done their work. We shall do Father's work, is all what he said. 17 years passed, and more people began to come to him at the Purnai tree. But the devotees could not sit in the pouring rain or the burning sun like he did. Hence, in 1976, The devotees bought a house in Sannadhi street and begged him to go stay there. Bhagavan accepted their prayer and started to live there. Yet, he did not keep anyone with him. He was like the wind that cannot be caught by the hand. Let us now listen to Devaki Mathaji speak about the Sannadhi street house.
When you enter Sannadhi street house, there's a veranda, a small one, L-shaped, and the long window, the long and wide window, which serves as a wall. You would see the whole window completely filled up with dry malas, so that people could not see inside. When you cross this small veranda, there's a huge wooden door, and then a very small passage, dark, because there's no window at all. Only if you open the door, the front door, there'll be some light. Now this passage leads to the inner hall, which served as Bhagwan's abode, Sri Vaikunta, Kailash. For 17 years. When you enter it first time, you will be in a shock. The way things would be scattered all over the place. Things would seem chaotic, but there was a definite order in which Bhagavan had placed things. So much so, if somebody offered to do some cleaning, Bhagavan would scream, No, there is no need. Because we would disturb his cosmos. There would be a heap of cigarette boxes in one place, a heap of matchboxes in another place, and the newspapers all scattered around, and books, and dirty clothes turned black from brown, hanging on the nails on the wall here and there. And so many odd pieces, like Pandora's box. And there is one heap of bottles, from the smallest to the biggest, all heaped up, carrying different offerings. And many of them had stayed as they were for a long time. And then there would be a mud pot and an aluminium vessel, and above all, there would be 17 photographs of his own, and what's more, the same one, hanging next to each other. There used to be small mats, not very small, but mats torn here and there with huge holes, and so exposing the floor beneath. And there would be a lot of dust. He would have spread it there only for the visitors to be seated on that. There were more holes than mat. And then in the next bay, there would be gunny bags rolled, just 2 or 3 of them rolled into a bundle which served as his pillow. And one gunny bag spread on a cloth was his bed. Now, outside in the small veranda, there was a mat. Again, it was torn here and there. That was his simhasan, that was his throne. This emperor of the whole cosmos was comfortably seated, very majestically seated on the stone mat, and conducted his spiritual ministry.
It is not surprising that just like bees to honey, people from all walks of life thronged to Swamiji's abode, seeking his heavenly blessings. In the beginning of his Sannadhi Street spiritual ministry, Bhagavan used to take the devotees inside the house. However, later on, he began to give darshan in the small veranda of his house. Whenever the devotees came, he would light a cigarette and start interacting with them. Sometimes he would smoke a full cigarette, sometimes only half. A rare few occasions, he would just light a cigarette and put it out immediately. What calculations were involved were only known to him. But when he smoked, there was neither smoke nor any smell either. Our bad karmas would get burnt up in his smoking. Our problems would be resolved. Once, when a foreigner asked him directly, "Why are you smoking, Swami?" he said, "Before Papa Ramdas gave this madness to this beggar never liked smoking. If anybody smoked in the same room, this beggar would vomit. He would run away from the place. But after this got madness, it was difficult for this beggar to be with people and work for them because of their dense vibrations. Hence, Father said that this beggar should smoke." If there were only 4 people on the veranda of the house, he would call the gate boy and ask him to buy 8 teas. Before the teas arrived, 8 people would gather there. The tea also would not be distributed according to the order in which people were seated. He would keep 1 cup here, 1 cup there, and in a seemingly random fashion. In case anyone changed the order or disrupted what he was doing, he would get wild in anger. He might even ask us to get out and we might lose his blessings. Hilda Carlton, a spiritual head from New York with her own following, said, "When Yogi Ramsuratkumar moves a teacup, either planets on the cosmic level or the events of a particular country would move too, resulting in certain definite changes." Whatever he did would be a welcome blessing. In his presence, our ego would coil up and sit in utter humility. He never bathed. Sometimes it might take 1 year for him to change his clothes. But has the dirt of the Ganges of purity not have the power to purify us? In the beginning, he carried a staff of peacock feathers in his hand. Bhagavan's left hand index finger and thumb would move ceaselessly, as though in ceaseless japa. In every step that he took, Father's work was getting done. Nobody could enter his presence just like that. Even his anger was a blessing to his devotees. Both the people who had true devotion towards him and the people who had severe problems but no devotion could have easy access to his presence. But people who approached him only to test him landed in severe trouble. Even if there was a lack of people in front of him, he knew each and every one of their thoughts thoroughly. Once, in a cemetery near Ishanyamat, Bhagavan danced, making sounds of Lord Shiva's drum by his own mouth, jumping from one tomb to another. The devotees who saw this said that it was Lord Shiva's thunder, the cosmic dance of Shiva. It was a sight for the gods which created goosebumps all over. In Sannadhi Street House, people from all walks of life, from the simple and the poor, the learned, and people from the police and judiciary departments, industrialists, musicians, music directors, reputed writers, actors, actresses, scientists, sadhaks and saints, all visited him seeking his gracious blessing. Our ex-Prime Minister, Srimati Indira Gandhi, received his blessings when she came to Tiruvannamalai. And another PM, Shri Chandreshkarji, visited Tiruvannamalai seeking his blessings. Also the Kerala Governor, Pa Ramachandran, Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice Anand, Sri Balakrishnan, and many High Court judges, higher government officials sought the fortune of his blessings. Sri Periyaswamy Thuran, the chief editor of Tamil Encyclopedia, Dr. T.P. Meenakshi Sundaram, the multilingual former Vice-Chancellor of Madurai University, and the well-reputed punster Shri.Kee.Vaa.Jagannathan-sung were not only drawn to Bhagavan, but also composed many beautiful songs on him. All the 1024 excellent spontaneous songs of K.V.J. simply cascaded from him like waterfalls in Bhagavan's presence. Sri Yogi Ji had a close relationship with Swami Yanananda Giri. Once, Sri Yanananda Swami announced in front of his devotees that Yogi Ramsuratkumar was the reincarnation of Mahatma Kabir Das. Both the Mahatmas had played many leelas together, which are talked about joyfully by their devotees. Kanchi Paramacharya would bathe 5 times a day. Bhagavan rarely bathed 5 times in 47 years. Yet, there was such oneness in God between the two. Paramacharya had said about Yogi Ramsuratkumar, "He is far, far above all." The leelas played together by both of them are very interesting. Mata Amrita Anandamayi said our Bhagavan is a great Avaduta who has come down to this world to work ceaselessly for the upliftment of the people. Puravi Palayam Koti Swami told the music director Sri Ilayaraja twice, Yogi Ramsuratkumar is an incarnation of God. When Sri Yogi Ramsuratkumar did Namaskaram to Swami Muktananda of Ganeshpuri, he stopped Sri Yogi Ramsuratkumar saying, "You and I are one and the same." Sringeri Acharya said in appreciation, "He is a great knower of God and a great sage." Between Jai Krishnamurti and Sri Yogi Ramsuratkumar, there was a unique closeness. Mahatmas like Sri Satya Sai Baba and Paranu Krishna Premi kept a close friendship with Bhagavan. Sri Sri Murlidhara Swami worships him as one of his 3 Gurunathas. Music director Sri Ilayaraja, singer Sri S. Sudas, and writer Sri Balakumaran were famous artists and devotees of Bhagavan, who also came seeking his blessings and divine presence.
यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम् परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवाम युगे युगे। My master Swami Ramdas की जय, माताजी कृष्णाबाई की जय, राम नाम की जय।
Bhagavan's spiritual ministry continued in Sannadhi Street House for the next 17 years. Due to a lack of proper food and ceaseless hard work, Bhagavan's health gradually declined. In 1993, he fell sick with fever. That same year, the former trustee, Sri Janardhanan, with the help of a few other devotees, bought 3.5 acres of land for an ashram. With the decline of his health and becoming aware of the fragility of his body, Yogi Ramsuratkumar eventually consented to an ashram for the sake of the devotees. In November 1993, when Bhagavan became weak with sickness, there was no one to attend to him. Devaki prayed so much to Swami to come and stay in Sudama house. Bhagavan agreed to come and stay at Sudama for only 3 days. However, his health became worse, and Dr. Radhakrishnan, a neurosurgeon from Kerala, had to be called for treatment. The doctor hurried to Sudama and stayed for a week treating Swami's viral fever. Seeing the weak condition of Bhagavan's body, he prayed to Swami to stay in Sudama for the protection from the outside weather. The 4 Sudama sisters, knowing it was their great fortune, joined the prayer fervently, and Bhagavan finally accepted. The spiritual ministry he did gathered such a crowd that soon his darshan had to be shifted to the ashram. On February 26, 1994, Swami Sachidananda came on invitation to the ashram and laid the foundation stone for the Pradhan Mandhir. After that, Sri N.S. Mani accepted the responsibility of a trustee and looked after the construction of the buildings with the help of Bhagavan's grace. Until the Pradhan Mandir was completed, Bhagavan's darshan took place in an old darshan mandir first, then the ashram dining hall, and finally in Pradhan Mandir. In 1996, Justice Arunachalam was appointed by Bhagavan as his spiritual heir. In 1999, Bhagavan started daily sadhu bhojan and monthly free medical camp on every second Sunday for the sake of the poor people in and around Tiruvannamalai. That same year, he started the Devaki Veda Pathshala as well. From 1999, Bhagavan's health began to decline gradually. He contracted cancer in the abdomen, which began to spread fast. Even though Bhagavan never wanted allopathic treatment, he ended up accepting treatment after the pressure from devotees. A surgery took place in Dr. Ranga Bhashyam's clinic. When he had recovered a little, he returned to the ashram. But he soon fell sick and began to suffer again. With tears streaming down her face, Devaki asked him, "You have always labored hard, only for the welfare of people. Why should you suffer like this?" Bhagavan said, "Father is making this beggar suffer for some cosmic balance," and even smiled in that weak condition. Bhagavan has given a promise to all of us saying, "This beggar can do much better work without this body." On February 20th, 2001, Bhagavan left his physical body and attained Mahasamadhi, leaving his devotees in a flood of unbearable grief. All the wonderful leelas played by Bhagavan when he was in the body make a book all on its own. The same kind of wonderful leelas still occur in the glory of his name. The experiences of his devotees are standing testimonies to that. Bhagavan declared about his ashram, "Those who enter this ashram will never go back empty-handed. My Father's blessings are pouring on them like rain. Whether they are aware of it or not, this is the truth. Today, his name, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, is a powerful mantra for thousands of people. It gives help, guidance, and protection to all those who do japa of his name. His ashram, under the able leadership of Sri Justice, has become a holy sanctuary and a pilgrim center of peace, joy, and service to all the devotees. A temple for Bhagavan was built by the efforts of Sri Justice Arunachalam at the birthplace of Bhagavan in Nardara. It is a jewel in the crown of Sir Justice. We, the devotees, should live in constant remembrance of him by holding on to his feet and his name, making our life fruitful. Ever watchful, he blesses his devotees all the time, always living in their hearts. Our Bhagavan is the very life of us, the devotees. His grace undoubtedly reaches out to everyone. Just as Sabari collected, tasted, and gave only the best fruits to Sri Rama, let us all remember again and again the varied Leelas of Bhagavan and keep his divine form in our hearts, chanting and offering his namas as flowers at his lotus feet. To the ever-gracious Murti, our Bhagavan Sri Yogi Ramsuratkumar, our salutations again and again, forever and ever.
My Father's blessings to all of you. My Father blesses all. My Father blesses all.
This story of Bhagavan Yogi Ramsuratkumar has been adapted from Devaki Mathaji's book, Bhagavanin Valke Charidam. We submit our namaskarams to Devaki Mataji, who is dedicated to Guru Seva. We thank all the devotees who were involved in creating this blessed video. Jai Yogi Ramsuratkumar.